Imagine driving through your own neighborhood after a long day at work. The sun has almost set, the streets are quiet, and all you want is to reach home, kick off your shoes, and rest. Now imagine flashing red and blue lights suddenly appearing behind you, even though you've done nothing wrong. Your heart skips a beat. You slow down, pull over, and wait. That's exactly what happened to Judge Isaiah Carr on a calm Friday evening in Winterdale, Michigan. Isaiah had just finished a long day at the courthouse. He'd handled 3 hearings, dozens of files, and endless decisions that affected people's lives. All he wanted now was a moment of peace. His brand-new black Lexus hummed smoothly along the wide, tree-lined street. He loved that drive home, the soft jazz on the radio, the golden light reflecting on his windshield, and the feeling of calm after the storm of the courtroom. For him, that short drive meant freedom, a reminder that life could still be quiet and beautiful. Then came the sound that changed everything. A short, sharp burst of a police siren. Isaiah looked into the rearview mirror and saw the flashing lights racing toward him. For a second, he thought maybe they were after someone else. But when the cruiser stayed right behind him, he felt his stomach tighten. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't broken any rules. Still, he signaled and pulled over to the curb. The street was empty except for the faint sound of cicadas in the distance. Isaiah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. As a judge, he'd seen every kind of case, traffic stops, misunderstandings, even wrongful arrests. But he never imagined being on the other side of it. The police car stopped behind him and a tall officer stepped out. She walked toward his window with slow, heavy steps. Her hand rested on her holster. No greeting. No smile. License and registration, she said curtly, her tone cold enough to chill the air. Isaiah nodded politely. Of course, officer. He reached slowly toward the glove compartment, moving carefully so she wouldn't misinterpret the motion. He handed her the documents. Her badge read Rhodes. She snatched the papers without looking at him, her eyes already flicking between his face and the shiny new car. She frowned. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." Isaiah blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry? Did I do something wrong?" "Step out of the car," she repeated, louder this time, her hand tightening on the holster. For a moment, Isaiah just sat there. The world outside felt still. He could hear his own heartbeat. He'd spent his life respecting the law, defending it, representing it. But right now, the law was staring at him with suspicion. "Ma'am," he said softly, "there must be a misunderstanding. My name is Isaiah Carr. I'm a judge at the Winterdale courthouse. This is my car. I live just a few blocks down." Officer Rhodes raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Out now." He sighed quietly and obeyed. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he stepped out. The evening breeze brushed against his suit jacket. He felt exposed, like the street itself was watching. From behind the curtains of nearby houses, shadows moved, neighbors peeking out, wondering what he'd done. Rhodes circled the car, glancing at him the way someone examines stolen property. "We've had reports of a vehicle like this stolen last week," she said flatly. "Black Lexus, same model." "This car was purchased from the dealership 3 days ago," Isaiah replied, still calm but firm. "You can run the plates. It'll come back clean." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on him, unreadable. "Hands on the hood," she ordered. Isaiah hesitated, a sting of disbelief in his chest. He looked around. Quiet homes, familiar mailboxes, the same street where he jogged every morning. And yet none of it seemed to protect him now. Slowly, he placed his hands on the hood of his car. The metal was still warm from the drive. As Rhodes began patting him down, the humiliation hit harder than fear. He wasn't just a man being searched. He was being stripped of dignity, reduced to a suspect. He could feel the curious eyes behind every window. The silence around them was heavier than any courtroom he'd ever stood in. "Officer," he said carefully, "this isn't necessary." "If you'll call your superior, save it," she interrupted sharply. "We'll verify at the station." "Officer Rhodes," he said again, his voice calm but carrying quiet authority. "You may want to confirm before you make a mistake." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Isaiah replied evenly. "I'm advising you to check the facts." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She grabbed her radio and called something in. Minutes crawled by. The air felt thick, charged. Isaiah stood motionless beside his car, the weight of decades of bias pressing down on him. Then the radio crackled. A male voice came through, rushed and stern. "Rhodes, stand down immediately." Judge Carr is a respected member of the community. I'm en route. Roads froze. The color drained from her face. She looked at him differently now, not as a suspect, but as someone she'd just wronged in the worst possible way. She lowered her hand from her holster, cleared her throat, and mumbled, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, there must have been a mix-up." Isaiah straightened his jacket, his calm returning though his heart still pounded. "A misunderstanding," he repeated softly. "That's what we're calling it now?" Her eyes dropped to the ground. The silence stretched again, this time filled with shame instead of tension. As the police lights faded into the night, Isaiah sat back in his car. His reflection stared at him from the windshield, tired, disappointed, yet determined. He realized something in that moment. Even with all his achievements, all his titles, he was still vulnerable to the same injustice others faced every day. He started the engine quietly, the hum of the Lexus cutting through the still night air. "This can't keep happening," he whispered to himself as he drove off. He didn't know it yet, but this single traffic stop would change not only his life, but the entire town of Winterdale. Isaiah drove home in silence that night, his hand still tight on the steering wheel. The hum of the car felt different now, less comforting, more haunting. The same Lexus that had once been a symbol of his hard work now felt like a target. Every passing streetlight flickered across his windshield, lighting his face in brief flashes of anger and disbelief. He replayed the moment again and again. The officer's tone, her hand near her gun, the cold suspicion in her eyes. She hadn't seen a judge, a husband, or a neighbor. She had only seen the color of his skin. And for a man who spent his whole life defending justice, that realization cut deep. When Isaiah finally pulled into his driveway, the quiet of his home greeted him like a heavy fog. His wife, Denise, was sitting in the living room reading. She looked up, smiling, but the smile quickly faded when she saw his face. "Isaiah, what's wrong?" she asked, setting her book aside. He closed the door gently behind him and exhaled. "You won't believe what happened," he said, his voice low. "I was pulled over tonight, accused of stealing my own car." Her eyes widened in shock. "What, you?" "Here." He nodded slowly, removing his jacket. "Right down the street. Officer said the car matched a report of a stolen one. Didn't care who I was. Didn't believe a word I said. Had me step out, hands on the hood, right there in front of everyone." Denise rose from the couch, anger and worry flashing across her face. "That's unbelievable. You've lived here for years. Everyone knows you?" Isaiah gave a bitter laugh. "Apparently not everyone. To her, I wasn't Judge Carr. I was just another black man behind the wheel of a nice car." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound between them. Denise stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Did she at least apologize?" "She did, after the captain called her off." He paused, shaking his head. "But that's not the point. It's not about the apology, Denise. It's about the humiliation, about how easy it was for her to see guilt before humanity." Denise looked into his eyes, her voice soft. "You didn't deserve that, Isaiah." He sighed and sat down on the couch, his shoulders slumping. "No one does, and that's what hurts the most. I thought being who I am would protect me from things like this. But it didn't, it never really does." Denise sat beside him, her voice trembling slightly. "So what now? You're not going to let this go, are you?" Isaiah looked out the window. The night was calm, but his mind wasn't. "No," he said quietly. "I can't. This isn't just about me anymore. If this can happen to me, a judge, what about the people who don't have a title or the resources or the voice to fight back?" Denise nodded, understanding his tone. "Then make them listen," she said. "Do what you do best, turn pain into change." The next morning, Isaiah returned to the courthouse. Everything looked the same. The marble floors, the echoing hallways, but it all felt different. As he walked to his chambers, a few colleagues greeted him warmly, unaware of what had happened. He smiled politely but kept walking. Inside, he sat behind his desk, staring at the piles of case files waiting for his attention. But he couldn't focus. His mind was somewhere else. By mid-afternoon, he made a decision. He called the police department and requested a meeting with Captain Reynolds, the same officer who had arrived the night before. The captain agreed immediately, his tone apologetic over the phone. When Isaiah arrived at the station, heads turned. Officers straightened up. Whispers followed him down the corridor. He wasn't there to complain or demand punishment. He was there for something bigger. Captain Reynolds met him in his office. "Judge Carr," he began, standing up quickly. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for what happened last night." Officer Rhodes was out of line. "I've already spoken to her about it." Isaiah nodded but didn't sit down. "I appreciate that, Captain. But this isn't about her alone. It's about something deeper. What happened to me was not an isolated mistake, it's part of a pattern." The captain frowned slightly. "I understand what you're saying, Your Honor, but—" "No," Isaiah interrupted gently but firmly. "I don't think you do. Bias doesn't always shout, Captain. Sometimes it whispers. It hides behind procedures and suspicion. It's in the way someone looks at you before you even speak." Captain Reynolds leaned back thoughtful. "You're right," he said slowly. "We've had these issues before. We do the standard sensitivity trainings, but clearly, it's not enough," Isaiah nodded. "Then let's do something more. Let's make real change. I want to work with your department. Not as a victim, but as someone who believes we can do better." The captain studied him for a moment, surprised. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Isaiah replied. "Because if this system can humiliate me in my own neighborhood, then it's broken, and it's our duty to fix it." There was a long pause. Then Captain Reynolds extended his hand. "You have my word, Judge. Let's make it right." Isaiah shook his hand firmly, a quiet resolve in his eyes. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But something had to start somewhere, and maybe, just maybe, it could start with him. That night, Isaiah stood at his window looking out over his quiet street. The same road where it all began now seemed different. He thought about Officer Rhodes, about the way her face had shifted when she realized who he was. He wondered if she went home that night thinking about what she'd done. He hoped she had. Denise joined him, slipping her arm through his. "You okay?" she asked softly. Isaiah nodded slowly. "I will be," he said, "because I'm not going to let this moment go to waste." He didn't know it then, but this decision, to turn pain into purpose, would soon lead him into something far bigger than a single traffic stop. It would test his courage, his faith, and his belief in justice itself, and it would all begin with one simple idea. Change must start where the system is broken, inside the hearts of those who enforce it. The following week, the Winterdale Police Department was unusually tense. Word had spread fast about the incident with Judge Carr, though few knew the full story. Some whispered that the judge was furious and demanding punishment. Others guessed he'd let it slide. But no one expected what Isaiah planned next. That Monday morning, Isaiah arrived at the station again. The moment he stepped inside, conversations hushed. Every officer's gaze followed him, curious and cautious. He didn't wear his robe today, just a simple navy suit. No symbols of power, no badges of authority, just a man walking into a place that had once made him feel small. Captain Reynolds met him at the entrance. "Judge Carr," he greeted, extending a hand. "Glad you could make it." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your time." They walked down a long hallway lined with framed photos of decorated officers. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. When they reached the meeting room, Isaiah noticed a few officers already seated, including one face that made his heart tighten slightly. Officer Rhodes. She sat stiffly in the corner, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at him. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Everyone, this is Judge Isaiah Carr. He's asked to speak with us about something important." Isaiah looked around the room, men and women in uniform, some curious, others defensive. He could feel the wall of skepticism before he even began, but he'd spent years talking to juries harder than this. "I'm not here to lecture anyone," Isaiah started, his tone calm but firm. "And I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because something happened to me that opened my eyes in a way I didn't expect." He paused, meeting their eyes one by one. "Last week I was pulled over by one of your officers. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't breaking the law. I was driving home from work like anyone else, but I was treated like a criminal before I even said a word." The room was quiet. No one moved. "I've spent my life upholding justice," he continued. "But that night justice didn't recognize me. And if it can happen to me, a judge, what about the people who don't wear a title? What about the man who can't speak up? The woman who's too afraid to argue, the teenager who doesn't know his rights?" A few officers looked down, shifting uncomfortably. Others stared straight ahead, arms crossed. "This isn't about blame," Isaiah said softly. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that bias, unseen, unspoken, can still control how we treat each other. And it's about changing that. He glanced briefly at Rhodes. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes flickered with something that wasn't anger. It was shame. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. Judge Carr came to me with an idea, he said. Something that might actually help us see things from a new perspective. Isaiah nodded. I'd like to start a program, a partnership between the court and this department. A space where officers can understand the human side of the law, not just how to enforce it, but how it feels on the other end of the badge. Murmurs rippled through the room. One officer raised his hand. With all due respect, Judge, we already do training, diversity seminars, sensitivity courses. None of it changes anything. Isaiah smiled gently. That's because those programs teach from a distance. You can't learn empathy from a slideshow. You learn it from people, from stories, from standing in someone else's shoes, even for a moment. There was silence again, long, thoughtful silence. Finally, Captain Reynolds said, I'm willing to try it, but it'll only work if my officers are willing too. Isaiah looked around once more. That's all I ask, he said. A chance to start a conversation. As the meeting ended, some officers nodded politely. Others left quickly, their faces unreadable. Only one lingered, Officer Rhodes. She waited until everyone else had gone, then slowly approached. Your Honor, she began awkwardly. I wanted to say I didn't mean for things to happen that way. Isaiah looked at her, his face calm but steady. You meant to do your job. I understand, she hesitated. I thought I was following procedure. Reports of a stolen car, and her voice trailed off. Isaiah studied her expression. Procedure is meant to protect people, officer. But when it blinds us to who they are, it becomes a weapon. Her eyes dropped. I guess I never thought about it that way. He nodded. That's why I want you in this program. Not because of what happened, but because I think you can help others see what you've seen. Rhodes looked surprised. You want me involved? I do, Isaiah said simply. Real change starts with those brave enough to face their mistakes. She didn't answer right away, but there was a flicker of something new in her eyes, a mixture of humility and curiosity. That night, Isaiah sat in his study, a notebook open in front of him. The first page read, Bridging the Gap, Building Understanding Between Law and Life. He began outlining his ideas, shared workshops, courtroom observation sessions, and open discussions led by people who had faced bias firsthand. He wanted this to be more than training. It had to be a movement. Denise entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. You're still at it? She asked, smiling softly. Isaiah chuckled. It's a start. Small steps, but maybe they'll lead somewhere. She handed him a cup and sat beside him. You're really going through with this, aren't you? He nodded. I have to. Change won't happen unless someone's willing to begin. Denise reached for his hand. Then begin, she said gently. You've already survived the storm, now turn it into something beautiful. Isaiah smiled at her words. Outside, the night air was still. The same street where everything had gone wrong now seemed full of quiet promise. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he was ready to face them. Because for the first time since that humiliating night, Isaiah felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The first day of the new program began on a gray morning in late March. The police training room, usually filled with noise and chatter, was quiet this time. A group of officers sat in a semicircle, their expressions mixed, some curious, some skeptical, some clearly just there because they were told to be. At the front stood Judge Isaiah Carr, a man who had once been on the receiving end of their suspicion. He wasn't wearing his robe today, just a light gray shirt and calm composure. The same calm that had steadied him through countless courtrooms, though this time his heart beat a little faster. Before we start, Isaiah said gently, I want to make one thing clear. This isn't a class. I'm not here to lecture or point fingers. I'm here to talk and to listen. There was a long pause before someone spoke. Listen to what exactly, Judge? One officer asked. We already know the community doesn't trust us. Isaiah nodded. Then maybe the question is, do we trust them? A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. He let the words hang, not as accusation but as reflection. From the back, Officer Rhodes watched silently. She had agreed to attend. Not because she had to, but because something inside her wouldn't let her walk away. The memory of that night still lingered. The shame in her chest when the radio had called her off. The look in Isaiah's eyes, not angry but disappointed. It haunted her in quiet moments. As the session went on, Isaiah told real stories, not about crime, but about perception. About the young man who was arrested because he fit a description. About the mother who cried in his courtroom because her son had been misunderstood, not malicious. He didn't speak with bitterness. He spoke like someone who had seen too much pain and refused to let it harden him. When the session ended, most of the officers left quickly. Rhodes didn't. She stayed seated, pretending to check her notes until the room was nearly empty. Isaiah noticed. "You stayed," he said softly, walking over. Rhodes looked up, a little embarrassed. "I just wanted to say thank you for not coming in here to attack us." Isaiah smiled faintly. "That's not my purpose. Anger changes nothing. Understanding does," she nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about that night. You know, the stop. I told myself I was following protocol. But honestly, I was following fear." Isaiah studied her face. "Fear of what?" "Of being wrong," she admitted quietly. "Of missing something. We're trained to assume danger first, to stay alive. But maybe that training blinds us too." Isaiah didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "I didn't see a judge that night," she said. "I saw a stereotype, and I hate that I did. I've told myself for years I'm not like that I'm fair. But fairness isn't just about rules. It's about how you look at someone before they even speak." Isaiah nodded gently. "That realization, it's the first step toward real change." She looked down at her hands. "Do you really think people like me can change how we think?" "I think," Isaiah said, "people like you are exactly the ones who can." That small moment became the seed of something unexpected. Over the next few weeks, Rhodes began shadowing Isaiah in his courtroom. It was part of the second phase of his program, to let officers see justice from the other side of the bench. She sat quietly behind him, taking notes, watching as defendants came and went, men and women of all backgrounds. Some guilty, some not, but all carrying stories deeper than their charges. One afternoon, a young man was brought in, accused of assaulting a store clerk. He looked barely 20, his eyes wide with fear. As the prosecutor read the charges, Rhodes noticed the boy trembling. When his mother stood in the back row, tears streamed down her face. The case unfolded differently than she expected. The evidence was weak. The boy had been misidentified by a witness who later admitted she hadn't seen clearly. Isaiah dismissed the case and ordered the boy's release. The mother broke down, thanking him again and again. When the courtroom emptied, Rhodes sat frozen. Isaiah turned to her quietly. "You all right?" She swallowed hard. I didn't realize how easy it is for one mistake to ruin a life." Isaiah nodded. "That's why justice needs more than law. It needs heart." Rhodes looked down, her voice trembling slightly. "I've arrested kids like him before. Thought I was helping. Maybe I wasn't." He rested a hand on the bench, thoughtful. "The system isn't broken because of bad people, officer. It's broken because of blind spots. The ones we pretend not to see." For the first time, Rhodes smiled faintly, though it was sad. "You know," she said, "I used to think people who complained about bias were just exaggerating. But watching this, it's different when you see it up close." Isaiah nodded. "It's different when you live it." She looked at him with quiet sincerity. "I'm sorry. For that night. For not listening." He didn't respond immediately. Then he said softly, "Apologies are a good start. But change, as that's the real apology." From that day, something shifted in Rhodes. She became one of the first officers to volunteer for every session, helping Isaiah organize discussions and encouraging her peers to attend. Some mocked her at first, called her the judge's favorite, but she didn't care. She'd seen too much now to go back to ignorance. And as word spread, so did Isaiah's program. What started as a small meeting in one precinct slowly began to reach others. Local newspapers wrote about it. Community members started attending. The department that once symbolized division was now becoming a place of dialogue. One evening, as Isaiah packed up after a session, Rhodes stopped him at the door. "You know," she said, smiling faintly, "you might actually be changing things." Isaiah chuckled. "We're changing them together." She nodded. "Feels strange. The person I once humiliated is now the person teaching me what justice really means." Isaiah looked at her, eyes kind but steady. Sometimes, he said, humiliation is the soil where humility grows. For the first time, Rhodes smiled, a real one. Then maybe I'm finally starting to grow. As they walked out into the cool evening, the station lights glowed behind them, not as a symbol of authority this time, but of hope. Neither of them knew that their newfound partnership was about to be tested in ways far greater than either could imagine. Because change, as Isaiah was about to learn, never comes without resistance. The early weeks of the reform program had felt promising. Officers were showing up, conversations were happening, and the tension that once filled the precinct was slowly being replaced by curiosity. But underneath that surface of progress, something darker was stirring, something Isaiah couldn't see yet. It started with a rumor. During one of the training sessions, a young officer mentioned a construction company, Apex Builders, that had recently won several big city contracts despite a long list of safety complaints. At first, Isaiah didn't think much of it. Corruption cases came and went, and he dealt with them all the time in court. But what caught his attention was the officer's tone, nervous, hesitant, like he knew something he wasn't supposed to say. That night, Isaiah stayed late in his office, the courthouse almost empty. The city outside was quiet, lights from downtown reflecting off the rain-soaked windows. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few clicks on his computer confirmed what the officer had hinted at. Apex Builders had been cited for multiple safety violations, yet not one had led to legal action. Every report had mysteriously vanished or been marked resolved. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. That doesn't happen by accident, he murmured. The next morning, he called someone he trusted, Detective Aaron Walker, an old friend and one of the few people Isaiah knew wouldn't turn a blind eye to corruption. Aaron was tough, methodical, and known for following the truth even when it led to uncomfortable places. When they met at a diner later that day, the look on Aaron's face confirmed Isaiah's suspicions. "You're not wrong," Aaron said quietly, stirring his coffee. "I've been looking into Apex for a while now. On paper, they're clean, but behind closed doors, they're paying people off, inspectors, contractors, maybe even some of the police brass." Isaiah frowned. "You have proof?" Aaron shook his head. "Not yet. Just whispers. But I think it runs deep, too deep." Isaiah sat back, his mind racing. "So they build unsafe sites, people get hurt, and everyone just looks the other way?" Aaron nodded. "Exactly. And whoever's behind it has power. Real power. Enough to bury complaints before they even reach court." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "That means someone inside the system is protecting them." Aaron looked him dead in the eye. "That's what scares me, Judge. It's not just a few bad cops. It's the whole chain of command." For the next few days, Isaiah couldn't focus on anything else. Between court hearings and community meetings, his thoughts kept drifting back to Apex Builders. He started reviewing old case files, cross-checking names, and noticing something alarming. Several officers involved in past Apex-related arrests had either been transferred or had suddenly resigned. One evening, as he was packing up from court, he noticed a familiar face waiting by his car. Officer Rhodes. "Judge Carr," she called out. "Got a minute?" Isaiah smiled, motioning for her to come over. "Of course, Officer Rhodes. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. "It's about Apex Builders," she said quietly. "Something's going on, isn't it?" Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "Why do you say that?" "Because I was told to drop a report last week," she said. "A safety complaint from one of their sites. My supervisor told me it wasn't worth pursuing. But when I checked the file later, it was gone, deleted." Isaiah's chest tightened.
"Do you still have a copy?"
She nodded. "I made one before it disappeared. Call it instinct." He gave her a look of cautious admiration. "Good instinct. Keep it safe." She hesitated, then added, "Judge, I think some of our own are involved. I've seen officers visiting those sites in unmarked cars. No patrol logs, no reports, just disappearances." Isaiah took a deep breath. The pieces were falling into place, and it terrified him. That night he called Aaron again. "We have a problem," he said. Aaron's voice came through, low and tense. "I know, I think they've caught wind of what we're doing. One of my informants went dark yesterday." Isaiah felt a chill run through him. "Are you saying they're watching us?" Aaron sighed. I'm saying be careful. The people behind this have money, connections, and no conscience. Days turned into weeks. Isaiah and Aaron began quietly collecting evidence. Payroll records, property contracts, court filings, anything that connected Apex builders to members of law enforcement. Rhodes helped from the inside, slipping Isaiah files that were supposed to be confidential. One night, Isaiah sat at his desk, reviewing a list of transactions when his phone buzzed. It was Aaron. We've got something big, Aaron said. A payment trail. Cash transfers from Apex's executive account to a shell company, and guess who that company belongs to? Isaiah's heart pounded. Who? The chief of police, Aaron said. He's been on their payroll for at least a year. Isaiah froze, gripping the edge of his desk. The man sworn to uphold the law, the same man who had apologized for Rhodes's mistake, was part of it. Aaron continued, and it doesn't stop there. I think the mayor's involved too. There's no way this much money moves around unnoticed. Isaiah's mind raced. If we go public, they'll destroy us before we can prove anything. I know, Aaron replied. That's why we have to move smart, quietly. Build the case before they realize how close we are. Isaiah nodded slowly, though a lump formed in his throat. He had spent his entire life believing in the justice system, and now he was staring at the cracks running right through its foundation. That night, as rain poured against his window, Isaiah looked out over the dark streets of Winterdale. What had started as a simple act of humiliation was now pulling him into something far bigger, a web of deceit that threatened to consume everything he believed in. He picked up his phone and sent one short message to Aaron. We keep going, no matter what. Outside, thunder rumbled over Winterdale, echoing like a warning. Isaiah knew that uncovering the truth would cost him dearly. But the judge who once believed justice always won was now about to learn how hard it was to fight for it. The tension in Winterdale grew thicker by the day. What started as whispers had now become silent fear. People sensed something was wrong, though no one dared to say it aloud. The news was full of half-stories. Small scandals swept under the rug, investigations that began and quietly disappeared. But behind the scenes, Isaiah Carr and Detective Aaron Walker were building something powerful. The truth. For weeks they had gathered files, emails, payment logs, and hidden reports. Rhodes helped quietly from the precinct, handing Isaiah flash drives and printed memos at odd hours, each one more revealing than the last. Together, they uncovered an entire network of corruption that stretched from the police department to City Hall, a system built not on justice, but control. One night, Isaiah sat in his office long after everyone had gone home. Rain tapped gently on the window, and the only light came from the desk lamp glowing over piles of evidence. Every file told a story of betrayal, forged signatures, altered case outcomes, and secret transactions. But one paper caught his eye, a contract showing Apex builders paying for security services, signed by the chief of police himself. He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it all. They built their empire on silence, he whispered. And we've all been complicit. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. Meet me, urgent. They met at the same diner they'd used before, its flickering neon sign casting blue light across their booth. Aaron looked exhausted, his face drawn and his eyes heavy. He slid a folder across the table. We've got them, he said. The bank records, offshore accounts, all of it. They can't hide anymore. Isaiah opened the folder and scanned the pages. Every number, every transfer, every name was there. It was enough to bring down the entire network. But even as he felt the rush of victory, Aaron's expression stayed grim. There's something else, Aaron said quietly. They know we're digging. I've had cars following me all week, unmarked. They're watching my house. Isaiah's pulse quickened. Have you told anyone? Aaron shook his head. Who would I tell? Half the department's in on this. The rest are too scared. Isaiah rubbed his chin, thinking. Then we can't take this through normal channels. We have to go straight to the public. Aaron frowned. You mean leak it? Isaiah nodded. Not leak, tell the truth openly. If we stay quiet, they'll bury this before morning. Aaron leaned back, processing the idea. That's suicide, he said softly. You realize what happens to people who expose power like this? Isaiah looked up, his voice steady. Yes, they get remembered. The next few days were a blur. Isaiah reached out to Lisa Chen, a local journalist known for integrity and courage. She ran the late-night news on Channel 7, the kind of reporter who didn't back down when things got dangerous. When Lisa saw the documents, her face went pale. "If I air this, they'll come after all of us," she said. "You're sure about this?" Isaiah nodded. "I'm sure. If we don't do this now, there won't be another chance." She closed the folder and looked him in the eye. "Then let's do it right. Primetime live." The night of the broadcast arrived like a storm. The studio lights burned bright and the air felt charged with electricity. Isaiah sat beside Aaron, both wearing microphones, both silent as the countdown began. Lisa stood behind the anchor's desk, papers trembling slightly in her hand. When the red light above the camera blinked on, her voice came steady. "Good evening. Tonight we bring you a story that will shake the foundation of this town." The screen filled with documents, images, and names. As Lisa spoke, Isaiah could feel the tension in the air, the invisible wall between truth and denial crumbling, piece by piece. Aaron described how the money flowed from Apex builders through fake accounts, ending up in the pockets of powerful officials. Isaiah explained how cases were dismissed, evidence was erased, and innocent people were framed to keep the system running. By the time the segment ended, the studio was silent. Even the crew stood frozen, stunned by what they had just heard. Lisa turned to Isaiah. "You understand what this means?" He nodded. "It means they'll try to stop us, but at least now everyone knows." Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the world outside changed. Phones rang endlessly. Reporters surrounded the courthouse. Social media exploded with outrage. Certain justice for Winterdale, the exposed Apex, corruption uncovered by dawn. Protests had begun outside the police station and City Hall. Dozens of people chanted for answers, waving signs that read "Justice isn't for sale" and "We stand with the judge." But the celebration didn't last. That same morning, Isaiah's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have done that. Now it's personal." He stared at the screen, his hands tightening around the phone. Denise, standing nearby, saw his face and immediately knew. "Isaiah," she said softly, "what is it?" He turned the screen toward her. She went pale. "You need to go to the police," she whispered. "I can't," he replied. "They are the police." That night, as they sat at the kitchen table, Denise reached across and took his hand. "You've done something brave, but please, promise me you'll be careful." Isaiah squeezed her hand gently. "I promise. But this isn't over yet." Meanwhile, Aaron had gone into hiding. He called Isaiah from a motel outside town. "They've issued a warrant for my arrest," he said bitterly. "Tampering with evidence, they claim. It's all fake, but it doesn't matter. They're trying to silence me." Isaiah closed his eyes, his heart heavy. "We'll clear your name, Aaron, I swear." Aaron's voice was quiet. "They think fear will stop us, but we've already gone too far to turn back." Isaiah stood by the window, looking out at the peaceful neighborhood, the same one where his nightmare had begun months ago. Except now it wasn't just about one man and a traffic stop. It was about an entire town learning the truth about power, privilege, and justice. He whispered to himself, "The truth has been spoken. Now comes the fight to keep it alive." And as thunder rolled once more over Winterdale, Isaiah knew this was only the beginning of a war he never asked for, but one he was destined to fight. The storm that followed the broadcast was unlike anything Winterdale had ever seen. In just a few days, the quiet town turned into a war zone of truth and denial. Protesters filled the streets, chanting for justice. News vans crowded the courthouse steps. Everywhere Isaiah went, microphones followed him, and the same question echoed from every direction. "Judge Carr, is it true?" It was true, every word of it. And now the people who had lived in silence for years were finally speaking out. But as the noise outside grew, so did the danger. Anonymous threats flooded Isaiah's phone. Black SUVs appeared outside his home at night, parked for hours, engines humming in the dark. Denise began jumping at every sound. She tried to hide her fear, but Isaiah could see it in her eyes. "Maybe you should stop," she whispered one night, her voice breaking. "You've already done enough." Isaiah looked at her across the table, the weight of exhaustion etched into his face. "If I stop now, they win. And everything we've built, everything we've lost, will mean nothing." Meanwhile, Aaron stayed in hiding, moving from one motel to another. His name was plastered across local news stations, branded as a rogue detective. But Isaiah knew the truth. Aaron wasn't running from the law. He was running from those pretending to enforce it. Then one morning, Isaiah's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Aaron. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. I have the final piece." Isaiah hesitated. Something about the message felt wrong. No context, no warning, just that line. He called back, but the number went straight to voicemail. Denise, sensing his worry, asked softly, "You think it's safe?" Isaiah slipped his coat on. "No," he admitted. "But if Aaron's risking his life to deliver this, I can't let him stand alone." The warehouse on 5th Street stood on the edge of town, surrounded by cracked asphalt and rusting fences. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with rain. Isaiah parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, his breath visible in the cold air. Inside, the building was dark, only faint light filtering through broken windows. His footsteps echoed. "Aaron?" he called. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Aaron, pale, tense, holding a folder close to his chest. "I've got it," Aaron said, his voice low. "The final proof. Emails connecting the chief, the mayor, and Apex executives. It's over, Isaiah. We can end this." Isaiah took a cautious step forward. "Are you all right?" Aaron nodded, but before he could hand over the folder, the sound of tires screeching outside shattered the stillness. Headlights sliced through the cracks in the wall. Doors slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Isaiah's heart pounded. "They found us," he whispered. From the entrance, 3 men in dark suits appeared, in the same faces that had been haunting him for weeks. The leader, tall and sharp-eyed, smiled coldly. "Judge Carr," he said, "we warned you, but you didn't listen." Aaron clutched the folder tighter. "It's over," he said, his voice shaking but defiant. "You can't stop the truth now." The man stepped closer, his smile fading. "Truth is just a story, detective. And stories can be erased." Before Isaiah could react, the sound of sirens blared in the distance, growing louder, closer. The men turned, startled. Isaiah's heart leapt. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Officers flooded the building, led by none other than Officer Rhodes. "Drop your weapons," she shouted, her voice steady, fierce. "It's over." The men froze, surrounded. One of them tried to run, but Rhodes was faster. Within minutes, they were disarmed, handcuffed, and led outside into the flashing chaos. Isaiah exhaled shakily, his legs trembling. Rhodes approached him, her expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. "You okay, Judge?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "You came just in time," she smiled faintly. "You taught me something. Never stay silent when justice is at stake." Aaron handed her the folder. "Everything you need is in here. Make sure it reaches the Attorney General before they try to bury it again." Rhodes nodded firmly. "Consider it done." The arrests that followed shook the foundation of Winterdale. Within days, the chief of police, the mayor, and several Apex executives were taken into custody. The investigation expanded statewide, uncovering years of bribery, fraud, and abuse of power. The headlines read, "Judge and Detective Expose Historic Corruption Ring in Winterdale. Officers' Courage Helps Bring Down City Officials." For the first time in decades, justice wasn't just a word, it was happening. But for Isaiah, victory came with mixed feelings. The sleepless nights, the fear, the danger, and they had changed him. He wasn't just a judge anymore. He had become something else, a reminder that even those sworn to uphold justice could be blinded by it, and that true justice sometimes comes from standing against the very system you serve. Weeks later, he was invited to speak at a town gathering. Hundreds of people filled the square. Officers, families, students, and citizens who had once stopped believing in fairness. As Isaiah stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous, but his voice when he spoke was calm and humble. "I didn't come here to be celebrated," he began. "I came here to remind you that justice isn't a building or a badge or a title. It's a promise, one that only stays alive when we refuse to stay silent." He looked toward the crowd, his gaze landing on Officer Rhodes standing proudly in her uniform, and Aaron smiling faintly from the back row. Isaiah continued, "This fight started with humiliation, with one person being judged for what he looked like instead of who he was. But that pain became something greater. It became a spark. And that spark lit a fire of truth." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "So if you remember anything from this story," Isaiah said softly, "remember this. Justice doesn't begin in the courtroom. It begins in the heart. As the applause swelled again, Isaiah stepped back, his eyes glistening. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time that morning, bathing the crowd in golden light. Denise joined him on stage, slipping her hand into his. "It's over," she whispered. Isaiah shook his head gently, smiling. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." And as he looked out over Winterdale, a town that had been broken but was learning to heal, he knew that his humiliation had become his greatest lesson. His pain had birthed purpose, and his story had become proof that real justice wasn't just about laws. It was about courage. It was about forgiveness. It was about change. And on that day, for the first time in a long time, Winterdale breathed again, not in fear but in freedom.